We all want to feel peace in our lives. Peace in our choices, our beliefs, our relationships, and our environment. I've learned that this desired contentment is often found through holding on to less. When we pare down what we own, what we consume, and what we value, we're left with what's intentional, a personalized curation of what is important and true and useful to us. I'm Shannon Leyko, and you're listening to Paring Down, a podcast aimed at helping you declutter not only your home, but any area of your life that's overwhelming. Here, we're having interesting and honest conversations about the physical and mental clutter that drowns out what truly matters to each of us. And together, we'll learn how to pare it all down, not for the sake of perfection or becoming rigid, rather so we can move through life with less overwhelm and more joy, wisdom, and peace. Welcome back. Today we are talking about rhythms. Rhythms really matter, especially when it comes to home management, because it really takes out a lot of the legwork, the mental load of trying to figure out how to make your life more simple. Because if you just stick to a regular kind of routine and something that our guests today call a flexible framework, which I love, then it just kind of makes our lives move a little bit more smoothly. And I think that the idea of a routine or a framework or a schedule can sound a little bit intimidating to some people because they're like, I'm more type B. I'm kind of go with the flow. And I love this conversation today because Ben and Brianna of Folklife Rhythms, they really talk about this in a way that doesn't feel stifling or prescriptive. It's just a matter of recognizing that if we want to live an intentional life, the best way to do that is to build it into the rhythms of our daily existence. You know, I always joke that around these parts, I run a tight ship. And I know not everybody does. So our rhythms that I talk about are pretty straightforward, right? Like, I mean, we have a strict bedtime routine. We do a strict quiet time every afternoon for 90 minutes. I do laundry every single morning. I have these routines that might feel a little bit tight to some people, and that's okay. You don't have to run a tight ship, but I do want to say that I don't think there's anything wrong with running a tight ship. I think that sounds like, oh, mean mom territory. And I don't know, maybe I am a mean mom, but running a tight ship and having these rhythms that are built in that my kids can expect, that I expect, actually, I have felt makes our house feel a lot more secure. And we'll talk about that more with Ben and Brianna today too. But running a tight ship is not a bad thing, okay? It doesn't mean that you have no flexibility, that you're just constantly caring more about your schedule than about the needs of your kids or even yourself. It just means that you know what works best for you, big picture. You know how much sleep you and your kids need. You know how much alone time that you and your kids need. You know, I talked about this in my screen time episode. You've figured out intentionality when it comes to screens and devices. I've talked a little bit about functional organization. It means that you've tweaked your house and put things where you actually will use them, right? That's what we're talking about when it comes to rhythms. I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation today. And I hope that it really helps you kind of decrease the overwhelm and come up with some good ideas just to make your life run a little bit more smoothly as a family. And if you don't have kids or a partner, I think that there's still a lot to be gained from today's episode. But I do want to put out there that Ben and Brianna's approach is really, their heart is to help other families in the sense of parents, kids, that kind of unit. If that doesn't apply to you, I don't want you to feel like this episode or that this podcast as a whole isn't welcoming to my singles out there or even to single parents out there, because we do talk about relationships in this episode a fair amount. And so I just wanted to kind of let you guys know that's what's coming your way in case you say, you know what, I'm going to bow out and listen next week. Or you can say, I'm sure I can still glean a lot of helpful information here, which I think you will. So that's your little disclaimer for the week. But let me tell you a little bit more about Ben and Brianna Folkman before I press play on our conversation that we had. Ben and Brianna are parents of 3 kiddos, and they are the founders of Folklife Rhythms, which is a blog that helps readers dive into consistent life rhythms and flexible frameworks that can help empower them and their kids to meet life with resilience, confidence, and a secure family and home. What a beautiful mission statement. So without further ado, let's welcome Ben and Brianna. Brianna and Ben. We have confirmed that it's Brianna, not Brianna. Okay, everybody on the podcast, this is Brianna from Folklife Rhythms. Thank you so much for being here, you guys.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Fun.
Yeah, you guys are the first couple I've interviewed. I've only done one-on-one interviews, so this feels like new territory for me.
Right on.
Right on. Okay, so would you tell everyone a little bit more about yourselves and your mission behind Folklife Rhythms? Let's get to know you a bit.
Sure. So we are Brianna and Ben Folkman. We are parents of 3, and we're actually expecting another.
Congratulations! When are you due?
In January.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
So we're excited. Yeah, January 11th. So you know how sometimes it's like you're okay with baby coming 1 or 2 weeks early. But with this one, we're like, you know what, maybe not, because that would be Christmas. So
you want to hear a fun fact?
Yeah.
My first child was due January 1st, born on Christmas Eve. My second child was due January 6th, born on Christmas Eve. They are both born on Christmas Eve.
Wow.
2 babies. Oh, wow.
So anyway, yeah, it could happen. Buckle up.
Yeah. And actually, my dad he's a December 23rd baby. So I grew up with like, there's a birthday around Christmas. It's fun,
Yeah.
you know.
It is fun. We love it. It's great. My husband's the 27th. We just, it's crazy around here. Anyway, I'm sorry to interrupt, but when you said that, I was like, I've been there.
Yeah. We live in Kelowna, BC, which is in Canada. And after having our 3rd, I am home with the kids, which is a blessing to be able to be there full time with them. And Ben works at, do you want to say?
Yeah, so I work at a company that builds buildings with shipping containers. So it's a lot of kind of creative teamwork, and it's kind of a manufacturing environment. So we ended up realizing, because Brianna ended up again becoming an office manager, and both of us kind of ended up in these roles sort of by accident, like followed different passions, and then realized we kind of like creating systems. So then when it came to family life and parenting, especially when you add kid complications to it, that became pretty practical as well.
Yeah, I loved reading a little bit about your story because you guys met doing music together at a wedding. So my whole background is in music. I lived in New York City for years, pursuing Broadway, singing. I was a professional vocalist for a couple of years. And then you also live in British Columbia, which I used to live in Ketchikan, Alaska, which just the scenery, you know, it's unbeatable in that area of the world. And I was like, oh, an organization. I was like, these people and I would get along really, really well. So can you tell me more then about Folklife Rhythms? I know that you guys have a website and you guys do a lot of kind of like your whole messaging is about these rhythms within your family. But I would love to hear kind of where Folklife started.
So it's pretty new. Like we started our blog, our website in January of this year. So we're about 6 months in, and it basically started as almost lighthearted of us kind of having fun with creating systems just within our own family of like, okay, getting to the beach is feeling chaotic every time, but we do it all the time. So how can we make this more streamlined? And so kind of figuring out like, okay, I'll grab these things every time. You get those things every time. And this is how it'll go. And we can make it faster and smoother. And so we kind of started with just sort of those sorts of things of practical, like how can we make life simpler and then therefore more enjoyable with all the kids running around. So we just sort of figured, let's start writing about it and sharing about it and hopefully starting more conversations with friends and family and beyond of what other people are experiencing similarly.
With family life and parenting especially, there are a ton of repeated tasks. So it's kind of like, well, if we tweak the way we do this one time, if we can find the brain space to just adjust it one time, then it helps tomorrow, but it might help every day that week or the entire phase of, you know, that child growing up through this brain space. So yeah, really has a positive effect.
Yeah, totally. I love that you guys approach it from such a practical level. I'm like, yes, you're speaking my language. You're basically doing project management of your family. You know what I mean? Because no business in their right mind is going to try and refigure out the same thing every single day. They're going to have their order of operations. They're going to apply that to all of their operations. And you're like, yeah, why don't we do that for our kids so we don't lose our minds every time? I think this makes a lot of sense. Where did the name Folklife come from?
So our last name is Folkman. So
well, that'll do it.
Kind of spun off that. Yeah, we like the musical
connotation
connotation. Yeah.
of folk.
And rhythms is musical as well, which I think you'll appreciate, but also like kind of another, maybe more comfortable word for habits and things like that. So that's what we leaned into with that name.
Okay, so I have to ask then, what instruments, what's your guys' musical thing? What did you guys do at a wedding? Were you singing, Brianna? And then tell me more.
So, so I grew up playing piano, did the whole Royal Conservatory thing, and so yeah, love playing piano. Now used it in more casual settings and at church. I've played, and then sing along, and enjoy singing as well. And Ben has a different background.
Yeah. So like maybe I'll start with how we met, which was basically I've sang at a bunch of weddings and like to write music. So I come at it from kind of the opposite angle, like very creative and self-taught. So I'm very average at lots of instruments. And I like lyrics and I like putting it together and bringing the band together. So it's interesting compliment to Brianna being way more trained. So so yeah, we ended up coming together when they asked me to sing at their wedding. And I said, you know what this song needs? It really needs some female harmonies. So I was single at the time, and I thought that was a really good idea.
Strategy.
Yeah, strategy.
I mean, it worked out. Wait, Brianna, how did you find this? Was this a Craigslist ad for a singer? Tell me more.
Okay, so yeah, he missed the point. This wedding was Ben's brother. And Ben's brother married one of my friends. So we were actually both in the wedding party. He was a best man. I was a bridesmaid. So we were both already going to be there. I had already.
This is a rom-com, you guys.
I know. Yeah. It was good. So Ben plays guitar, but also some of the like mandolin, ukulele. So I think at that wedding he was playing mandolin, and yeah. So through our doing music together, it's been fun because we've kind of both grown in how to like work together. But there was a time where I'd be like, okay, we're playing along. I'm like, hey, what chord are you playing? And he'd be like, just like strummed. It was like this one. Like what is it? It sounds like this. And I'm like, you don't know the chord name? Like, what are we on here? So we really had to learn a language together in music.
Yeah, that's so cool though. I mean, what a beautiful way to connect, because it's writing music. So I used to write music in high school, and I know we're off topic, but I love it. I don't care. With my friend, and he played guitar and I sang, and so we wrote, the melody I would mostly write and the lyrics, and he would kind of help me out with that, but he'd start with the chords and I'd write on top of it. And anyway, the point is that it's like a very intimate experience with someone. It's very vulnerable to write music and to sing with someone. So it totally makes sense to me that you guys fell in love. I just love that story. Okay, so Folklife rhythms. I love that it has the musical connotation, and then, like you said, the rhythms. It's like a much gentler way, like you said, of saying habits. I feel like when people say habits or schedules, it can feel like, like that's
maybe or
right. Exactly. So rhythms is a beautiful way to put it. And I know that one of your kind of like top tier motivations and missions in what you're sharing is the ultimate goal of peace, which is great. The whole intro actually of my podcast is like, we all want peace in our lives, like it's so important. And we can gain that peace through different avenues, right? Like the purpose behind our lives, what were we made to do in life? And how are we showing up for others? How are we being mindful and present? There's lots of ways to kind of arrive at that peace. But for you guys, how would you define peace? Like, why did that become the shining star for you?
Good question. So I guess I would say maybe this blends our last topic a little bit. Like when Brianna and I started playing music, we came at it from such different angles. And so like, when we're starting a family, you have two people who are very different, and you have to work through that and figure out how to essentially lead your own home. And then you realize, oh, your kids are different too. And you have more, and it's like, they're not the same either. So there's just a lot to kind of blend together. So I guess as part of the passion that made us start writing and talking about it more, was that, hey, I think we could talk about this for decades. Like it is kind of a light up sort of thing. And I think part of it too is when you start talking about it, maybe you were alluding to this with the word choice. Some people just kind of close up, like, don't tie me down. I don't want that structure holding me back, So we really try to like approach it like a flexible framework. We really want to approach it with some sense of humor and just be like, you know what, as parents, let's do more sharing, less comparing, just kind of approach it with a bit of a laugh. So we've found that sharing these kind of geek out things of this is how we took this thing and made it practical is just like, yeah, sometimes we laugh at each other, or other families are like, we will never do it that way, but that's okay. Like, we just kind of want to be like, you know what, ideas spur on more ideas, so let's get them out there, and we'll learn a lot too.
Yeah, like at least if you're sharing that you're trying to kind of put some systems into place to make your life easier with kids, it doesn't mean those exact systems will work for everyone reading your blog. But like you said, it gets everyone thinking and being like, oh, like I don't, this doesn't have to feel as heavy every time, like you said, we're getting the kids ready to go to the beach. Like it doesn't have to feel as difficult if I just put a little intention behind these behaviors. And I love that. That's like a purpose for you guys in life, is to share this with other couples to make their lives easier, right? Like I think for those of us who share things online, be it a blog or a podcast, it's because these concepts have worked in our lives. Like for me, decluttering and living with less has just changed my whole life, right? And I'm like, I want to share this. This is my mission. My purpose is to like help other people discover this avenue towards peace. And for you, it sounds like this is a purpose for you. Like we can help other couples find more peace in their families through these rhythms. And I'm just so glad you're doing that. And you're like stepped up, because it is scary to put yourself out online and be like, I'm going to write a blog post. Like, so good for you guys. I wanted to ask actually about those flexible frameworks. I love that phrase, flexible frameworks. And you said that those are important because you want to equip your kids to meet life with resilience and confidence and invigorate a family and home. So can you tell me a little bit more about some of maybe your favorite flexible frameworks that have worked well for your family?
Do you have any off the top of your head?
Yeah. So maybe to blend the piece in as well, I find that's a pretty broad goal. Like it's kind of vague. Like, how do you get there? So this is where it's like, well, let's try something. We'll take a practical step.
Maybe one thing I could add, jump in there, is I would have said about the piece is that we've realized that we try to be careful in our writing in saying like sharing examples from our life of these are things that have helped us, but these are the things that we've kind of identified help us feel peaceful and more calm and accepting of how life is going at the moment. But it looks different for everyone. So it's more like that heart of it, of pursuing peace. And that's kind of where it has to begin, because it will start to shape up differently for each person. So kind of leading into back to the frameworks, I think there's like some in our life would be things like, bedtime, the classic bedtime routine. So how does this look every day? We have our framework. It's usually not connected to like a time of the day, but this happens first. And then after this is what will happen. And then this is what comes next. And we kind of have our rhythm in that way. And the kids know and expect that. But then because they have that kind of security that they're confident in is going to happen each day, when things do come up and it's like, you know what, we're staying at the beach late tonight, or friends are out and we're not going to be the ones to leave first. We want to stick around too and have fun. And we just really find that they embrace the flexibility and can handle those spontaneous moments with more resilience when regular life is a little more predictable and stable.
Yes.
So
that makes so much sense to me, because it's the same. We just got back from vacation in Ohio at my in-laws' house, and we are very structured in a lot of the things we do here. Like we eat dinner at 5:30, they get in the bath at 6:45, everybody's down in bed by 7:30, and there's a routine of how that bedtime happens, right? Yeah. When we were in Ohio, we were like, go with God. You know what I mean? Go hang out with your cousins. We're late at a baseball game. Like, it's fine, right? Like, you don't have to really do it. We do a 90-minute quiet time every day.
Yeah.
And we didn't implement that, right? And so like they just think it's the coolest ever. But the second we get back home, they're comfortable getting back in their routine. They understand it. And so I think you're right. Like when we have these routines, it's if we're approaching them not so stringent that we can't allow for flexibility, then because that might create them to be like panicked and anxious. But if we say, hey, this is how we operate normally, and we will do some treats kind of here and there, and we will do things differently when we're on vacation, then it kind of allows them to understand, like, oh, I can live a structured life and cling to that for security, like you said, but it also doesn't have to be like a source of anxiety.
Totally. Yeah. When you go off track, it's not like, oh no, we need to get back into our groove. It's like, okay, we can enjoy this and no, we'll get back when it's time. And it'll feel good when we're back in our groove and in our routines and rhythms. But for now, let's just enjoy the spontaneous side of life too.
Yeah, and it's interesting how you say you snapped back into the rhythm once you got back in the or your home environment. Because if you intentionally set up your home environment, things do just end up happening easier. So maybe you tell me if this is funny or not, but one thing we do to set up our home environment is when we're, Kelowna's by a lake. And so there's beaches, as we've mentioned. And so going and coming can be a terrible transition, going or coming, but we try to make it as smooth as possible because that's awesome when you're there. We have all of our socks by the door for the kids. So that just makes it easier to, when you're loading, unloading, or landing and exiting, everything's close at hand. And so that's something that we find, like, you set up your environment, it just makes it easier. You kind of forget that you're doing it automatically.
Right. I mean, that's part of home organization from a functional level rather than aesthetics, right? Like I know some
Yeah.
girlfriends that like keep their kids' toothbrushes in the kitchen because that's where they brush their kids' teeth. Or I've talked before about how I keep my my youngest has a little man bun. It's like my favorite thing ever. And I keep his hair ties next to his diaper station because that's when I want to do his hair, not in the bathroom, And so that functional organization really, it comes into play. And like you said, when you set up your home in a way that's not chaotic, this goes back to home management as well, and decluttering and all of that, and paring down what you own. It does make these rhythms so much easier. Like if you're not drowning in the chaos of, toys all over the place and nothing has a place, then they're going to be distracted by X, Y, and Z when you're trying to get them ready for bed or when you're trying to get them ready for school or whatever. But when the dining room table is completely cleared off and the only thing on the table is their bowl of oatmeal in the morning, it makes it a lot easier for them to sit down and eat their bowl of oatmeal. It's just practical.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. That actually makes me think of another framework totally along those lines of managing toys and playtime with the kids. Like when it's just our family at home, when it's me and the kids for the day, we pretty much stick pretty strictly to the, like, when you're done with that toy, that one goes away before we bring out the next one. We kind of tidy as we go. And that's our framework, but it flexes when we have friends, cousins, or company over because, part of the focus in that moment is for us to connect with our friends or our family that are visiting.
Time
So,
limited.
yeah. So it's like, you know what, kids, like, you do your thing. This is a flex day. Have fun. The playroom's going to get pulled out. We'll deal with it after. But then, yeah, when we come back to our home days of just us, that framework of like, well, this is how we do it typically, rhythmically even, then kind of comes back pretty smoothly.
Yeah. And hey, it's a positive compounding effect. Like you add up a bunch of these little things, and then you hopefully are taking steps towards a little more peaceful home. Like since you brought up that, Brianna, like I really noticed that when we actually at the end of a company session, we all kind of cleaned up together, you end up sort of debriefing as a whole family as well. So that was kind of an unexpected, time, an unexpected bonus of spending that time together.
Yes, it's so true. I mean, I have helped my kids, of course, like clean up their room or whatever it is. And like you said, they open up and they chat. When we're busy doing something with our hands, it's easier to kind of talk. And that goes the same for kids too, right? Like it's more intimidating for them to sit there and on the couch facing you and you say, how was your day? And they're like, I don't know. What did you do? Nothing. Like and then you're cleaning the room and they're like, pick up something green. And they're like, I made a green dinosaur at school today. And you're like, oh, great. Like it
Yeah.
encourages that, and so these different rhythms, like you said, yeah, it's more than just keeping a tidy home. It's actually giving you something to do together as a family, and taking that responsibility too, I think obviously feels so good for your kids. And something I read that you guys have kind of named is a redo instead of a you do. And I loved it. And so can you share what you mean by a redo instead of a you do?
I think the you do was kind of in the context of like writing to our friends and colleagues and peers of like, if your kids have missed doing something that is part of your regular habits and rhythms, then initiate a redo with the kids of like, okay, your shoes stayed out. We're always putting them back into the closet. Let's go redo that rather than the ease of like, I'll just do it. Like, I'll just do it for my kids. It's easier. They're already over there playing. I'll just let them be and I'll just cover for them. So
Right.
that idea of it takes a little bit of extra effort, maybe even taking them away from what they've settled into. But like, we want to keep this rhythm consistent. And so let's redo that we missed and, establish even a little bit stronger that this is part of what we do at home. So,
Right, because if you don't consistently I mean, the kids are kids. They're not going to remember everything that they're supposed to do, or they're going to get distracted or just lazy or whatever. We do too as adults, right?
yeah.
But if you consistently kind of remind them like, hey, this is part of our routine without nagging, but just like, let's do a redo. I love that phrase. Then I think about my own kids when they come off and they kick their shoes off, and I feel like 1/3 of the time I have to say, hey guys, can you guys come back in the mudroom and put your shoes in your bin, right? They each have a bin. It's very simple. Just
Yeah.
put the shoes in there. But whatever. For 3, 4, and 6-year-olds, they struggle with that. But that's a redo, right? And so the goal is that we're going to move from them only doing that 1/3 of the time to 2/3 of the time to that is a rhythm that they are used to in life. And that will benefit them too. They'll get used to kind of walking in a home and immediately putting their shoes somewhere instead of kicking them off, which, those little things add up through life to a well-managed home that will then give them more peace and comfort when they are adults or teenagers or whenever. So I think that's great. Ben, were you going to say something, add something to that?
Yeah, it's also kind of the journey from not getting lost as the parenting team in just tidying all the time. It's the journey towards going from tidying over to teamwork. Like the kids are part of this. They need to know that they are a legit part of this and that we're kind of all into this home thing together.
Yes. Well, okay, great segue because that's exactly what I wanted to talk about next because, I think today's conversation is really special because obviously I've talked on the podcast before about having a tidy home and taking responsibility. And we've talked about, kids and getting them involved too. But what you guys are sharing is so special because it's not just the couple. It's not just the parent and the kids. It's the whole family unit doing rhythms as a whole family. So everyone is equally responsible, or if not equally responsible, it's a fair share of how things are split up and make sure that as a team, you're working together. And one of the things you're doing on your blog right now is a teamwork series. It's a parenting and teamwork series, and I love it. And you've named these 7 areas to kind of incorporate more rhythms in order to, I guess, have a more peaceful environment and a better home to live in. But I want to start with how I think you kicked off your blog post. It says that these rhythms are part of being dependable partners. Can you share why you think dependability is kind of like a widely underrated piece of every relationship?
Sure. I think that when it comes to dependability, it's kind of like how much can you trust that your partner is going to do what you kind of expect, even when you don't have to talk about it over and over. So, like, I guess you tell me if this is a good example, Brianna, but I go to work early. That's a family decision, maybe unique to us. So then Brianna handles the kids in the mornings all alone. So then we've got a rhythm in the evening about we've got to get the dishwasher started before bedtime routine so that we can unload it after bedtime routine. So usually we
so that in the morning I can start off the day with a clear dishwasher, the kitchen is ready, simple, smooth,
fresh.
Love that for you.
Clean slate.
Yeah.
So that's an example of the timing principle too. But when it comes to dependability, it's like, I guess how my personality / body works is I go pretty hard all day. But then when I'm done my day, I basically am like, I want to shut my brain off, like borderline crash. And Brianna's not exactly the same way. But when I'm nearing that line, it's like the last thing I want to do is unload a dishwasher. I timed it. It literally takes like 2 minutes, but it feels horrible. Like it takes so long. But that's just all emotions. So it basically takes a commitment to being dependable on this thing that we kind of agreed to and we have a reason for. It's only that why that gets me through that moment. It's just the emotional rhythms of the day. I couldn't do it if there wasn't a good enough reason.
Showing up for your partner, being a dependable, partner in life. I mean, that's so important. I think about that all the time too. We rely on each other. Like, I never have to think about changing out the trash because my husband does that, and he never has to think about if he's going to have underwear in his drawer that's clean. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
because I do that, right?
Yeah.
And those things are important to be dependable with, right? And it doesn't mean that we don't step up for each other. Like, of course, like there are times that he's had a particularly long day, or maybe he's even out of town. Of course, I will do dishes in the evening if I need to. I don't love it, but I will step up for him. And of course, on the weekends, sometimes I might forget to throw in a load of laundry because X, Y, and Z, and he throws in a load of laundry. So it's not this like strict, this is your job, this is my job, and like, why didn't you do that if you didn't, right? Like, of course, we're there for one another. But I think those flexible frameworks and dependability, like you said, it is a huge part of being in a healthy relationship. And it's attractive, right? When you're like, thanks for being someone I can count on.
Totally. Well, yeah, like two other words that kind of jump to mind for me is like it just builds trust and then consistency in the home. And one thing we've talked about, and in the relationship, but one thing we've talked about is how communication, everyone knows, is such a key part, a fundamental part of a relationship that's healthy. But we found that in a way, if you can set up certain things that you can actually minimize redundant communication, things like, so did you do the trash? Oh no, oh, you wanted me to do it today, but you did it yesterday. How was I supposed to know I'm doing it today? Like those are almost the things that it seems like couples can end up getting nitpicky on, or end up being like, why are we now tense? We're just talking about something that's like a regular, repeated task in our lives.
Yeah.
So having those roles and being dependable in them can almost minimize that kind of communication and free up space for fun, connective communication.
Yeah, it's almost like micro steps that add up again. Because if we are not spending time on just confirming who did that basic task this time, then you've got more time for other principles of teamwork, like curiosity. Like, hey, this person who I've been living with, you got to be intentional over time to keep curiosity alive and keep the fire burning. It's a lot easier when you've got the free brain space and time to do so.
Totally. And it's so cool that all of this does kind of relate back to rhythms, whether it's creating security for your kids where they are in an environment that they can count on, or it's you and your partner being able to connect more deeply. I mean, rhythms are so important. And I think you're doing such a great job communicating that, because I'm thinking it through, and we do have really good rhythms, but I don't know if I've ever identified that as like a piece of why I think my husband and I do feel really good. We're in a great place together. And it's easy to say, oh, that's just because we get along so well and because we have the same values and all of those things that matter. Sure, compatibility matters, all of that. But you're right. I'm like, oh, well, I think the way we set up our rhythms actually probably has helped us so much, because we don't have to talk about those extra logistics. I mean, we're parents, of course we talk about logistics all the time. But like it takes off that extra layer. I love that. Okay, so these 7, I don't know the word for them, these 7 principles of teamwork are purpose, unity, individuality, curiosity, care, consistency, and authenticity. Okay, I love every single one of them. I wish we had time to like unpack every single one, but we should also just like leave a little room for people to go to your blog and read them too. Okay, so I would love to first though at least talk about maybe 2 or 3 of these. Can we talk about how you incorporate them in a rhythmic manner? Because I think this is really interesting, because people might think of something like purpose. We'll start with that one. How do we make this like steady and reliable and consistent in our lives as a family? Because purpose can just sound so vague, right? Like we live for a purpose, right? But like you guys really bring it down to a practical level. I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah, it was actually a cool challenge for us because we started this teamwork series talking about the things, the characteristics and the principles that we found have really helped us grow in our teamwork. And actually, we're just in the middle of kind of a secondary series after that of how to make those things rhythmic, just like you kind of are mentioning. And it's a bit of a challenge, actually, because some of them are more broad, almost even abstract concepts. So I think with the purpose one, I mean, a lot of that is hopefully you've chosen a partner where you do share values on those deeper levels, things that aren't always changing. It's like, okay, we already are kind of on the same page with these things. But in terms of life shifting with family and kids, like one example we've kind of found is purpose and values maybe kind of go hand in hand in the rhythmic context of, so in this season, what is our purpose? Is our purpose to pour into our kids, and are we wanting to offer them opportunities? Like, are we wanting to fill up our schedule so that they can do lessons and classes and sports and all the awesome opportunities that are out there? And that may be for a season we're like, you know what, this is what we want to pour into. And we're agreeing that this is kind of where we're putting our focus. But in another season, we might agree that, you know, right now we kind of need to pull in a little bit. Like our family is feeling scattered. It feels like we're not having dinner together ever because we're all on our own. I mean, we're not quite there yet with our little kids, but we definitely see that coming pretty quickly, needing to protect that time. So let's be united on our purpose now of really prioritizing this time with family and bringing our kids together. So the best we could kind of come up with in terms of making that rhythmic is just check-ins and time together. When can we actually carve out the time to not just talk logistics about schedule and who's going where when and all of that, you know, the things we just have to talk about, but to make time where we can kind of sit down in a calm place. We always say, like, get your favorite drink or whatever it is, like make it feel date-like, even if it's at home, and just be like, okay, how are we feeling in this? Like, are we feeling like we're living into the things that are important to us? And that is ultimately the purpose we want to be kind of chasing after. And to make that rhythmic, it's just acknowledging that it might change a little bit season to season, but having that open communication about that with one another and the kids, really, as they get older too.
So I work for a couples therapist. Her name's Tracy Dalgleish, and she shares about weekly check-ins. And it sounds really similar to that, right? Like that, and that can be a rhythm that you build in that, you know, like every Sunday night you sit down, you don't watch a show with your partner on a Sunday night. Maybe instead you guys do your weekly check-in. Are we living according to our core values and the purpose that we've identified for this area of our life? Do we need to revisit what we're focusing on, like you said, because especially with kids, it changes so often of what the needs are for the family. And I think that's a great rhythm to be in, is to have this kind of like bigger picture check-in of like, are we living a life that we'll feel good about when we look back and the kids are grown? I think as parents, we can get swept away. Like you said, we get swept away with all the different little extracurriculars and the things that everybody else is doing, and just the insanity of the little kid years, and then the busyness of the soccer and extracurricular years, and then the busyness of the like sports and high school years and all of that, right? And so like I love that idea of doing like a rhythmic check-in. Hey, are we still aligned? It's
Right.
necessary if we're going to look back without regret, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Love how you
So the
said.
next one you guys had mentioned was unity as this principle for teamwork. Can you share some of the rhythms that you implement that reflect unity?
Yeah, so I think this kind of blends pretty nicely from your purpose, like, and the fact that if you want togetherness time, you literally have to intentionally protect that. There's going to be everything to pull you different directions. I guess it's another flexible framework example. So for us, we want to have some rhythmic time to connect every week and kind of recharge. This is like not too structured time for us. Like we usually work out and watch Netflix, and it's an evening. So it's usually Thursdays and Sundays at minimum. So can Brianna schedule something with her friends if it falls on that day? Yeah, we just don't want to bump that into the abyss. We want to move it around to another place that it will stay, right? So that over maybe a 2-week period, you do end up with those connection times or relaxation times. So it's a way to make sure we do stay united over kind of a longer rhythmic period, rather than just kind of being like, yep, there's another month lost. We never really did it. We wanted to, but we never really did. So
Right. I mean, because how many times do parents say, "Oh, we should do this."
Right.
Like
Yeah.
we should chat. We should, whatever. We should play cards sometime together, right? And you never do if you say, "Oh, we should do this
Right.
sometime." You
Yeah.
have to actually put it on the calendar. And I love that. That's what makes me so excited about this idea of rhythms is that it's not arbitrary. You know it's coming. I think that's the idea of a rhythm is that it's over and over and over, and that's what makes it rhythmic. And that's what makes it intentional too, is like if you have to make it intentional in order for it to be rhythmic, I would say.
yeah,
Yeah.
there's some
Exactly.
comfort and peace in that. Yeah.
Gosh, I love that so much. Okay, last one of these 7 principles before we'll just have to send listeners to your blog, which will be linked to the show notes, everyone, is individuality. And I loved this one because I think that this is one that maybe feels counterintuitive to people. You just talked about unity, and then we're like, oh, and individuality. Tell me more about that. So, what are some rhythms that promote individuality in your home and relationships, and why does individuality matter?
Got it.
Yep. Yeah,
I'll jump in.
you can edit me verbally just like you do in the blog. So,
Okay.
yeah, I feel like if we lose sight of the fact that like in our family, our parenting partner and kids and everyone, like they are individuals, like they're unique. If we kind of lose sight of that, we're losing something really significant. I think there's times where this is really challenging getting practical though. So examples of this would be when you're trying to parent the kids and you might be needing to manage your own emotional energy just as much as all the other little ones in the household. So there's times where I think we need to acknowledge, like, was it a hard day at work? Was it a hard day at home? Hopefully not both. Those days are the toughest. But the individual in front of you might need something different in this moment. Acknowledging that is key on a practical level, but then also trying to work through enough of those examples to get to a place where we're okay with each other needing different things or being good at different things. So that might be strengths in running your household, strengths in bringing humor back at the right time, strengths in when to be firm. We'd like to hope that we're really acknowledging each other and learning to do so better as we do lead a household together, because it certainly pushes us, doesn't it?
It
One,
certainly does.
one thing to add is we've kind of been talking and reflecting on how we used to think that sameness was a strength. Like, the more similar we can be, the more easy life will be and the better it'll be. But we've started to, long ago, we realized like there's such beauty in being different. We wrote a blog recently about, is agreeing to disagree, like, is that actually a positive thing or is that a shortcoming? Like, is it kind of like, shoot, we had to settle for that. But we found that if in a disagreement where we are just trying to see things the same way and we just aren't, that as a team, we need to just recognize sometimes, you know what, we are just seeing this one differently, and that's okay. But how there's still hope that we can work together as a team. So in that case, one of us has to trust the other and kind of empower the other to lead in this situation, and that we will follow, even though we might have chosen a different course of action if in that scenario we were going to take the lead. So
Yes.
yeah, there is kind of a lot of different components coming together in that word we chose of individuality, but basically just trying to come to that place of we don't have to be the exact same. We're not the same. It's pretty rare that a couple will see everything and actually think that the path chosen is going to be the best one every time. But in that, you can still work as a team.
For sure. I can't help but think of like all the Tracyisms in my head because I work for her.
Oh,
But,
yeah.
Dr. Tracy, to me, it's like she always says, I am me, you are you, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Right. And that's part of like being, whether it's with your kids or with your partner, we can't actually fully love someone or be loved without acknowledging those differences and respecting those differences. If we're trying to just mold ourselves into each other, there's no authentic ability to truly love and be loved. That interdependence rather than that codependence of being like, we have to think the same way.
Yeah.
Like, that's not actually a secure relationship, because a secure relationship is saying, we are different and I still choose to respect you. Right? Like, that's
Good.
huge. And so when it comes to like the rhythms of that, for me in my head, I was thinking, how does individuality show up in rhythms for us, for my husband and me? Like, on Saturday mornings, he loves to cook. So he is our baker, he's our cook.
Oh,
It's
nice.
awesome. It's the best. And I get very overstimulated very easily, and I'm with the kids all the time. And so Saturday mornings, I stay in bed. I usually like read a book for an hour or so, and he gets out in the kitchen and he cooks just an insane amount of waffles that we end up freezing for the week to give to the kids. And that's our rhythm, but it's respecting our individual needs, because sometimes I'm like, why does it take you 7 years to cook anything? Like
Yeah.
everything he cooks, it takes so long because it's all very intricate. And I'm like, I want to pop in a frozen waffle. Like I'm like the kids. I just don't care. And so it gives him his freedom to do his thing without me over his shoulder being like, shouldn't you maybe be doing something else other than cooking waffles for 3 hours, And I get to read in bed, and have that quiet time for myself. And so it's respecting that individuality of each other's needs in a rhythmic form every Saturday morning.
Love that. That's perfect. We
That
actually
good.
kind of do that similarly.
We can relate.
Ben makes pancakes Saturday mornings, and it's a slow morning for me.
I love that for both of you.
Unlike all the rest of them.
Exactly.
What's neat about that is there's a rhythm to togetherness and individuality as well, or just solitude, which is healthy. You need both. I think you function best together and best as an individual when you've got a good recipe, a good mix going on. Another example of that for us that is like, okay, we're definitely different, is that I really like watching sports. And I think as we've gotten further into family life, I've only valued it more because it's so different. It's such it's an example of refreshing variety. That's a changed mindset from, oh, but don't we have to have the same passions? There was a time where we probably tried to do more together, and that's good as well. But I think it's valuable when you can allow those differences to sort of find their place week to week, month to month. However you stage that out, it's got to be with the other in mind and with that respect you mentioned.
Absolutely. The respect is key. Okie dokie. So I ask 2 questions at the end of every podcast. So what is something that you are currently paring down? And it can be maybe something that you are decluttering in your home. It can be an idea or a concept that you're trying to get to the bottom of. Just curious what's something you're paring down.
I was trying to think about that because, to be honest, we're kind of always paring down a little bit. We're kind of always looking at our things being like, we've grown to the point where it feels good when we pick something to move out, which I know you would relate to.
Yeah, it's addicting.
Yeah, it is. So I'm trying to think what we're working on right now.
For me, one is just my calendar, like the schedule.
Yeah.
Like a couple of my examples from today have kind of been related to weekly rhythms because I'm probably at the top of capacity in some of those things. So leaning pretty hard into work. We've done a couple renovations and gotten to the end of some things that they took a lot of front-end admin. And right now we're basically like, I think by the end of this week, I think we're done. What's that going to feel like?
Space.
So so I kind of want to sort of intentionally reset the calendar in the month to come.
That's a great answer. That's a great thing to pare down. I love that. Okay. And what is something, this one's much easier. It's something that you guys are looking forward to right now.
I mean, we could go with a simplified calendar. We just came through a really fun stint. We did a big road trip, visited family and friends, and now I'm really just looking forward to days with the kids getting to the beach. Once you get to the beach, they just play and splash and are happy, getting the fresh air.
Parenting's easier outside.
Yeah.
So much easier.
So,
and you guys are like, what is the weather up there in the summertime? Like how hot is it?
We're in a hot streak right now. Like right now we're probably sitting at 30. Well, actually we're Celsius, 38 degrees Celsius. What's Fahrenheit? Do you know Fahrenheit?
Both of us are like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Neither do I. That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Hot.
I'm just thinking though that the beach probably feels better for you guys than here. I mean, where I am in Florida, it's like I can't even breathe when I'm outside, and then you go in the water and it's also a bathtub. I'm like, I will go to the beach in the fall where I am.
Where the water's cool.
No, I run hot, so I love to be in or near the water. It makes a big difference for sure.
Right.
So I think you kind of touched on this, but basically it's like, I'm really looking forward to just more summer at home. Like I just kind of want a little bit of consistency, a little bit of rhythm for the month or two to come, because guess what? School's coming fast.
I know. I got an email from the school, I think yesterday, and I was like, really? Already? Okay, here we go. All right. And last but not least, but where can everyone find you online? What should I put in the show notes to make sure that everyone follows you and kind of can read whatever you're writing and all of your resources?
So our blog website is folkliferhythms.com. So that's where you'll find all of our writing, all of our ideas and principles written down there. And then we do have an Instagram account, which is Ben Folklife. So that's kind of where you'll find us there, sharing a bit about family life and kind of what we're learning and thinking about in any given day.
Love it. I will make sure to link to both of those. And thank you guys so much for coming on. Thank you for all the rescheduling that we had to do. I'm so sorry about that. Summer. It's wild with all the travel. But anyways, it's been so fun to talk to you. I absolutely love what you're sharing. Definitely keep sharing. I think that this is kind of a familial concept that can help so many people and couples. So thank you for the work that you do.
Thank you, Shannon.
Thank you for having us.
You just listened to an episode of Paring Down with me, Shannon Leyko. If you enjoyed the show, it would mean the world if you can leave a review wherever you listen and share this episode with a friend. Those reviews really are what keeps a podcast on its feet for the long haul, and I will read every single one with a huge smile on my face. So thank you ahead of time. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to hit subscribe. Also, be sure to follow along on Instagram at paring_down, where I offer lots of tips and inspiration for paring down, along with what's new here on the podcast. Till next time.